Hey everyone, happy May 1st. It is also Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And also, yesterday, April 30th, was the 6th anniversary of Bernie Sanders announcing his 2016 run for President of the United States. And as you remember, in typical Bernie fashion, right, he was working hard in the Senate. He took a quick break and went outside to a piece of grass outside the Senate building, did a quick press conference announcing he's running for president. And that moment literally changed the course of political history and dialogue from then on. Bernie having the courage to stand up to the establishment and put his hat in the ring to, run against Hillary Clinton, one of the most powerful political machines in this century, right? Who had all the money, the establishment, and all the media on her side. Bernie was like, okay, someone's got to represent the progressive policies, which were, his radical ideas. And I remember an interview that he did early on where he talked about, like, if he could raise $50 million, then that would show that there was like some teeth in his radical policies, like a $15 minimum wage, health, Medicare for all, expanding Social Security and retirement, and like things like that, right? These radical things. And as we know, Bernie raised almost 5 times that amount, right? It just blowing all expectations out of the water. He was the final two, and nobody expected the success that he had. And I was very, very proud to have been one of his California delegates representing him from the Golden State at the convention in Philadelphia, which I learned an enormous amount about the Democratic Party and the political process within the party dynamics, and life-changing and eye-opening for me. So we have much to thank for Bernie for running in 2016 and 2020, right? And to this day, like, we have an entire bold, abundant ecosystem now around progressive leftists and progressive issues, right? We have a media ecosystem. There's way more grassroots organizations. There's more candidates than ever running from the national level, like for House and Senate, down to the state, county, city level, to school board, which is awesome. And most of that would never have happened had Bernie not run in 2016, and had he had the courage to do that. So what I want to talk about today is a concept that I have for some new content on the Bern Identity around video, and it was inspired by things that I missed during the campaign. So after Bernie dropped out, right, it's been over a year, and I mean, the movement is still there, but it's kind of in a state of disarray. Like, we're not cohesive like we were during the campaign, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because we had Bernie's presidential campaign to get us all focused. And from that campaign, not only did it get us focused on the policy issues, but it created momentum and energy, right? And one of the things that I really miss from the campaigns is going to the Bernie rallies and events. And I know, like many of you, just being at these rallies and events felt so good. It was so energizing and so uplifting and motivating and inspired that, like, when we left, we felt high and we're like, all right, I'm gonna call all these people, I'm gonna go knock on doors, I'm gonna produce content on my social accounts, I'm gonna talk to all my people, and right, you were just like, we were all so jazzed up, and more importantly, focused, to just go out and take action. And so I constantly think about like, how can we get back to that place? Like more that energetic place, like, feeling like that energy. We might have just experienced a once in a lifetime thing. I think that it's just the beginning, that we have potential to build upon that, and take that momentum, because from 2016 to 2020, right, that momentum grew and got bigger. And we'll see what happens in years to come. So, so based on that, so what I haven't done videos in a long time, because again, too, I was like, after Bernie dropped out, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the Bern Identity account, because to be honest, electoral politics is not my thing. I'm more about issues and like what's happening in community, but again, around issues. Like my top issues are Medicare for all, Green New Deal, animal rights, and justice, and a progressive food policy, like food policy issues. And I was just going to go back to that. And, but then Bernie became the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, and there's like new momentum around that. And I just really loved being on Twitter again with amongst you, a lot of you that I've made like friends I know I will have for life now, and a support system and an ecosystem, again, that is very supportive, inspiring and motivating, and I'm so grateful for all of you. And so I've been thinking about like, well, where can I help again? Like, where can I contribute in a positive, uplifting way? I know one of the things that I did during the campaign that a lot of people found very useful were my pep talk videos, right? Where I spent 2 minutes in my car, kind of reframing things or giving a new perspective or something uplifting or some data or whatever, right? I mean, the common comment that I used to get was, thank you for talking me off the ledge. Thank you, I'm not depressed like I was the other day, or thank you, I was ready to punch things and I'm calmer now, right? So the pep talks were kind of me being the calm in the storm during the campaign. And I loved doing them. It utilized not only my skills, but being of service and help. Despite the fact that those who know me well know that I don't like doing video. I don't like being in front of a camera. But I got over that because it's just faster to communicate things. And the way the pep talk video started actually was because I was on my timeline and I just saw all these burners who were just sad and depressed and angry and pissed off about polling things that were coming out. And I, had deep dived into these polls, and I'm like, well, hey, look, actually, we have this, and that going for us. And so I was out doing errands, and I pulled over into a parking lot and just did this quick 2-minute video and posted it to kind of help boost people's morale a bit. And it worked, and a bunch of people asked me to do another one. So I just kept doing them because people found them useful. So I want to introduce a concept that I'm going to test pilot. I'm kind of doing like what TV stations do with the new show, test piloting it. And so I'm looking at doing 10 episodes around this concept, okay? And what the concept is for this show, the theme of it is politics through inspired action. So what a lot of you know about me too in my Twitter account is that I like to focus on action primarily. And that's one of the positive things that I got out of my career in Silicon Valley and being the founder of a startup is that we spend 10% talking about the problems and the issues, getting out our frustrations and anger and whatever. And then we spend 90% of times on solutions, like planning, strategizing, executing on solutions, right? So I'm very solutions oriented. So I believe, yes, we should take some time to talk about what is not going right, what's failing, where we're frustrated, where we're angry, and there's a lot in our country, and it's justified, right? There's a lot to be angry and frustrated and pissed off about. But spending all of our time just focused there is not going to get the change that we want. And especially we're trying to work on systemic change, which is extremely challenging to do because we're talking about deep-rooted generational things that go back a long time, right? Changing systems is very tough and challenging to do. So again, 10% talking about like what's not going right, and then 90% getting into action. Now, what I loved about Bernie's campaign was that we mostly operated from inspired action. And the way I define inspired action is operating from a place of love from our heart, where we're also, it's about compassion and empathy. But the driving motivation is from our heart, our soul, our sense of purpose. And Bernie's energy, just his presence, right? The way he communicates with people, he's just a natural at that, right? I mean, Bernie is one of those people that even if he didn't talk much, you just like hanging around him because it just feels better, right? It feels safer, it feels more comfortable, it feels productive. Like, he's just one of those people. I think a lot of us, like, I could literally just sit in a room with him and just feel better. Like, that's one of the reasons I like, I like Bernie Sanders as a human being. So how can we operate, in taking action from a more inspired place? Because typical politics is just a lot of anger, a lot of combativeness, just a lot of like a lot of this, and personally, I'm not interested in that, and I stay away from it primarily because I am an energy sensitive person, and I am very protective about my emotional and mental wellness, and being around that too much just like it is very unhealthy for me. So a lot of the reasons I stay like positive or uplifting on my Twitter account is also for me to stay mentally and emotionally well, and also I think is more productive and again, solutions oriented. So back to this concept, politics through inspired action, and like it's something like pieces of this idea, like I've been floating around for a while, but I'm excited to talk about it and to kind of do it. And I'm doing it as a test for a couple reasons, which I'll get into later. But I wanted to share with you some of the ideas for episodes within this like show concept. One of it is, one thing is organizing and mobilizing on macro and micro levels, okay? So the macro level is the federal government, like the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, the presidency. Like what is happening with organizing and mobilizing on the macro level. Then we have the micro level, which now gets down into this, like the state, county, and city levels. So what's happening in organizing and mobilizing on those levels? So one of the things that I think, personally, that I think is as a strategy that would be effective, is that we simultaneously organize and mobilize on the macro and micro level, especially on really big policies like Medicare for All and Green New Deal. So let's take Medicare for All as an example. So we have on the macro level, right now we have HR 1976, right? The Medicare for All Act of 2021 that was just introduced recently. And we could do organizing and mobilizing around that. Then we have on the state level, like as an example here in California, recently was introduced CalCare, AB 1400, which is the California version of Medicare for All. I do know in New York has their version, and Washington State does too. So if we can also work on the state level. So as more states enact their own version of Medicare for All, it can also help apply pressure to the national, the macro level, right, and the national level. We can do these things simultaneously. And if a state like California, which not only is the largest state in the country, it is the 5th largest economy in the whole earth. So if we can get CalCare enacted in California, this could help perhaps create a ripple effect and get other states to do their version of Medicare for All, so that in the meantime, while we're still working on the macro national level, we're able to get healthcare to the masses on the micro level. Because again, getting Medicare for All in one shot, personally, I think that's a long shot. That doesn't mean we shouldn't work on it. I'm fully committed to that. I just think that we one strong strategy is to work on macro and micro levels at the same time. So also to get more of the people on board, so they're pressuring their Congress people and their senators, right? So that's one aspect of the show, is doing episodes about what's happening in organizing and mobilizing on the macro and micro levels. Then there's doing interviews with activists. So one of the things that I find personally fascinating is how people got into activism in the first place. Like, how did they become an activist? Like, you hear stories of people who used to work in corporate America. They saw all the dysfunction and the corruption, and then they decided to go into activism. Then you see people who've had like personal family and life stories within the system. Like, we've seen a lot of that with healthcare, right? People have had just traumatic, horrifying, and even life-ending experiences with loved ones around health, and now become advocates for Medicare for All. So, I mean, even myself, right? my evolution, into activism, I never thought that like I would ever call myself an activist or get into activism, and yet here I am today. And a lot of it was inspired by Bernie Sanders and all the amazing organizers and mobilizers and activists I've met since 2016. And again, thank you to all of you. So in order to get these big policies that we want, like Green New Deal, Medicare for All, we're going to need a lot more activists. We're going to need a lot more people, like I call it, like on the ground and in the cloud, right? So there's both organizing and mobilizing, utilizing social media, and then there's on the ground. We need to do both. And I know there tends to be this focus like, oh, if we just did it in the cloud, that's enough. It's not. A lot of organizing, mobilizing has to happen on the ground, and the social media happens concurrently with that. But it's great to hear how people got into activism, how they became an organizer, what was involved in that, why they love it, what they've learned. So I'm going to interview people and have them share their activism origin story. Another show episode idea is what is the latest in Big Us, meaning not me, us, Big Us. What is the latest in Big Us wins, successes, and progress? Now, if you just stuck to political Twitter, it would look like not much is happening in the movement. And a lot of that is because the mainstream media just doesn't talk about it. There actually is a lot of things where we're actually winning and moving forward and making progress most of you just don't know about it because it's just not getting spotlighted. And in leftist media, there's nobody really that does like a weekly or bi-weekly wrap up of like, okay, in the last week or two, here's where Not Me Us has been succeeding in electoral politics, in legislation, in organizing, in just, something positive or uplifting, right, where progress was made. Or, the progressives we did get elected in, like, what have they been doing? Like, what successes, wins, and progress, or new legislation that they've introduced that needs our help? Like, what is happening? Like, because there actually is a lot of that. And I noticed that, and I do my best to share as much. But I think if people got a better picture of actually what's happening, and most of these things are happening on the micro level, which is why you don't hear about, like, if you live in Texas, you're not hearing about things that are happening in Wyoming or Oregon, right? Or even here in California, we have big things happening here, and they may get attention just because we're a bigger state. But there's things happening like Nevada, right? We just saw the progressives take over the entire establishment of the Democratic Party over there. In Los Angeles, George Gascon became endorsed by Bernie. And Bernie Cranston in California became the attorney general of the largest county in the whole country. And he's doing stuff that's pissing off Republicans, and Fox News is talking about him a lot, which is good, right? Because that means he's doing the things that we need to see in an attorney general, right, in terms of progressive policies and issues. So related to that, one of the things that recently, like, Lauren Ashcroft on her Twitter asked people, like, what's a piece of wisdom that you have found helpful? And what I had shared, and this has helped me immensely through the years get through a lot of tough things, is that, and particularly things where I was impatient. Just because things are not changing as fast as you want them to doesn't mean that they're not changing at all. There is a process to things, and a lot of times you're going to have patience in the process, especially if you're trying to do big things. And like, we're trying to do systematic change, which again is dealing with generational, like, deep-rooted, long-standing, well-funded, billionaire protected, establishment, driven, like, systematic change, like that. A lot of that is gonna take, that kind of change is gonna take years. And if you just look at, like, the progress that we've made just in the 6 years since Bernie announced he was running, actually a significant amount of things have happened. It just doesn't feel like it or seem like it, again, because we don't have a lot of people painting that narrative of what actually has happened in that time, again, on the macro and the micro level. Because I think when you start seeing, especially on the micro level, what's been happening, it will make you feel a little bit more hopeful and positive and like, oh, okay, things are actually happening, okay? There actually is momentum happening. So that's one segment. Like, what is the latest in big me, us, successes, progress, and wins? And then the last thing is, like, issues that I'm particularly interested in, which I mentioned earlier, were the Green New Deal, Medicare for All, animal rights, and justice, and a progressive food policy agenda. And the last two in particular, with the animal issues and food policy, one of the things, again, Bernie had one of the strongest, like, platforms, presidential platforms out there. The one area that was missing, in my opinion, that really needed to be there, was a bold progressive food policy agenda. Like, food policy wasn't, like, a big thing in his platform. Like, he had pieces in other areas, but he didn't have a specific food policy slot. One of the awesome things that he did say that as president, he was going to put a moratorium on factory farms, which we absolutely need to do, and was also freaking bold of him to do, going up against the big meat lobby and industry, right? Because they are just as big, powerful, and vicious as big tobacco. So issues around animals and food policy, but also like back to animals. So there's so many things that animal issues tie into, like social, racial, environmental, climate, worker, like economic issues, that I'm honestly surprised that animal issues don't have more of a spotlight in leftist and progressive discussions. One of the big concerns that I have, particularly around COVID, is, okay, we're doing a lot to get out of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is great. What we haven't done is made systematic changes so we don't have another big pandemic again. And if you look at a lot of the data out there from like scientists and organizations, the next big predicted pandemic is looking like it will originate in a factory farm. Because if you look at what is happening in our factory farms, which again is not getting a lot of spotlight, it is just ripe. It is ripe for the next pandemic. And what is scary about that, on top of just not originating from a food source, right, meat, which is a huge food source in our country, another growing health issue that even the World Health Organization talks about, that we don't talk about often here, is the growing health crisis of antibiotic resistance in humans. And what a lot of people don't know is that in big pharma sales, in just specifically looking at antibiotic sales alone, over 70% of antibiotic sales are sold into animal agriculture, okay? And these are the exact same antibiotics that are prescribed to human beings. That's why we're having antibiotic resistance issues, because all this meat that people are eating have been, like, these animals have been just ingesting all of these antibiotics, which again are the exact same antibiotics you and I would get prescribed. And then people are eating all this meat, and now their bodies are developing a resistance to that same antibiotic. So they're again, it's kind of, again, scary and frightening, like what is not being discussed. But this is, again, another huge systematic change issue that needs to be addressed. So I'm going to be talking more about, again, what's happening in the factory farm system, what's happening in our food systems, what's happening around food policy, and organizing and mobilizing in those areas. Okay, so those are some of the ideas, episode ideas that I have, that you'll see with, politics through inspired action. And again, the main focus is gonna be on action. And then lastly, I am open to all your ideas. Anything that you haven't seen and noticed in leftist media, any subjects, topics, things that you would like to see more of or haven't seen at all, please send them my way. And again, I'm doing a test pilot for this, mainly for two reasons. One is, typical politics tends to be from this place of just like David and Goliath, like us against them. I am coming from a completely different dynamic where I'm like, okay, how do we operate from the heart, from the soul? How are we creating change through inspired action? Which, funny, I went and Googled, politics through inspired action, and there was literally nothing. Like, I don't think I've ever seen that on Google results where it says like, there's nothing around this, which I thought was kind of hilarious. So there's literally nothing. This is completely brand new, uncharted territory, like looking at politics through inspired action. So I don't know how it'll take. So let's try 10 videos and see what happens. And then second, to be straight up perfectly honest with you, doing these videos takes a lot of time. Even with my pep talks, I did an enormous amount of research and data collecting and analyzing, because that's my thing. Like, as you know, creative and you know, metaphysical or whatever that I get. Like, I have, you know, my left brain, like I am a data nerd. Like, I like looking at data. I like looking at infographics and maps. Like, you've noticed this, right? I like analyzing things. So there is a lot, you know, that I do in that. So that's a lot of my time. And so I'm also looking at my financial situation and my income, because I've spent the last, again, 5 to 6 years working on Bernie's campaigns and things related to issues like that. And going forward, I need to make a living. I still haven't figured out exactly what that is. I mean, it could be this, which would be awesome, but I don't know. So, and like doing the Patreon thing, and even when I did the pep talks, I listed my PayPal, and even that, I don't know, it's kind of weird for me. I think it's just more because it's new. So, so during the 10 episodes, I'm not going to do a Patreon yet. What I'm going to do is list my PayPal, Venmo, and I think Cash App, and leave a tip jar. So if you like what I'm doing and you want to leave me a tip, that would be great and much, much, much appreciated. And we'll see, you know, where that is. But I'm going to be looking also at the analytics of like views, responses from people. I'll probably do a questionnaire, and, you know, again, do a test pilot of these 10 episodes and do flavor of like everything I just shared with you and see how it goes. Hopefully it goes well. And again, I'm just looking more in areas where I can help people, help the movement, be of service, to help boost momentum and to get more action going, because that's what we're going to need in order to create a country that works for all. We're going to need a lot of organizing and mobilizing and more cohesiveness, working together, in a way, again, that is coming from an inspired place, like from our hearts, from our soul, from a sense of purpose. You know, again, going back to a lot of what we felt during Bernie's campaign, which again, I believe that we can get there again, right? We could get to that kind of cohesiveness and work together on the macro and micro levels and all together. Again, you know, not me, us. We're fighting for somebody we don't know. We're coming together as a people to create, you know, a higher good for all. So send me your ideas and let me know what you think of things, okay? And thank you for your time.